find formats with that these days. But with that, we're going to bring you down to my favorite format, which has a very high barrier of entry. That is Legacy and a classic matchup, Delver versus Sneak and Show. They've been doing this since I started playing Legacy. And of course, some big upgrades for both of these decks. The Sneak and Show player, of course, George Jabor, known for his love of Narset, Parter Veils. None of those here, but does get the One Ring, does get Atraxa Grand Unifier, and beyond that, it's just the busted cards you know and love. I mean, 4 Sneak Attack, 4 Show and Tell, 2 Omniscience. We're doing it. Classic.
Yeah, I've seen this deck before. It was a decade ago, but it looked a lot like this. Except we were talking, we were talking before this match. The One Ring feels like a massive upgrade to this deck, right? Where you have this Ancient Tomb start into a City of Traders start. Guess what? You can just play the One Ring on turn 2.
Like this? A little bit like this?
Just find all of your pieces. Fair enough. It runs into a daze, but look, that didn't cost you anything in the sense of like, that's what your deck tries to do. And that's just a value card. That's not your combo or anything like that. And you got to eat a land drop out of your opponent, who is forced to go tap land again here. Just kind of cycling through. A lot of mana advantage being grabbed by George here.
And Tim Hatch, of course, on the classic Teamer Delver, as you know it today. Of course, upgrades that we've seen throughout the weekend already. Questing Druid and all the Dragon's Rage Chiller Murktide stuff they've been doing for quite some time. Really, Questing Druid, the latest development, I'd say, of the Teamer Delver deck. But of course, another deck that's been around, but long gone are the days of the Nimble Mongoose. I'm afraid for this Delver deck, because that follow-up One Ring, that one's going to work.
Played around the second days there, was able to tap mana with City of Traders, play the island, makes the City of Traders go to the graveyard, but then taps the Ancient Tomb. You have 4 mana to play the ring, the 1 mana open to pay for a daze, and then his opponent doesn't want to give up their land drop, just a daze, a ponder, and now you've got a One Ring off and running. And at this point, the goal of the Sneak and Show deck is to assemble their Sneak and or their Show with a big creature, and with the One Ring going, that's a lot easier to do.
Absolutely. And, this is kind of like you used to see back in the Gen days, Dark Confidant dealing damage. You'd see players like try to like outrace it. Be like, oh, I'm going to kill you with your Dark Confidant. You're going to die to the flips. And that didn't really happen. That's why Dark Confidant was as good as it was. Right. There's going to be some of that at play here with the One Ring, where the One Ring, I don't think is going to kill George Jabor before it wins George Jabor the game. But I mean, it's not like the Delver deck really has any good ways to remove it. You have 1 Petty Theft. You have 1 Brazen Borrower that lets you Petty Theft it back to hand. That's it. That is how you answer this thing. That is one answer in your entire deck. Hard to find, and then, obviously still hard to resolve as well. It's still a 2-mana spell. And having played this Thundering Balls multiple times over the first few turns, we haven't had time to develop threats yet. We're fixing that now. 2 Dragon's Rage Channel is a great way to fix that.
That's the big deal, though.
Online.
He needed a huge Dragon Rage Channeler turn almost specifically, because even like playing a Delver or something there is almost just guaranteed to be too slow at this point. But going tap land 2 turns in a row, having a daze heavy hand and not a threat heavy hand for your turn 1, turn 2 plays did not work out well for Tim here at all. Now, that said, he does now have Delirium, I would assume.
Yeah, we got Artifact, Instant Sorcery, Lance. We do have Delirium.
So he's got threats. He's got threats now.
Right. So now the question is, will these Dragon's Rage channelers get George Jabor dead before he assembles all of his combo pieces from the One Ring? Now, obviously, the One Ring, I think, is very much what George Jabor's hand was doing. We kept a turn 2 One Ring and a turn 3 One Ring. It's probably the case that we don't have everything. Oh, well, I lied. We have it all. We don't even have to tap the One Ring yet. We just have Show and Tell right now. What's up?
He didn't even go digging here, and I was going to say maybe we want to think about the extra life, et cetera, et cetera. No, maybe we just had it all.
And that's the power of this deck, right? You can mulligan low, and if you just have your 2 lands, show and tell, and here's Emrakul, big Emrakul. So we don't even need to tap the One Ring. It was all just force bait the entire time, I guess. We have
the first one, maybe just an excellent hand here from George Jabor. And hey, what a time to get it. Round 7 of the Team Trios event. Your team playing for a shot in the top 8. What a good time for your deck to come through for you.
I love this so much. The Show and Tell just naked Emrakul is like one of the most likely ones to get blown out back in the day when people do crazy stuff like Gilded Drake or anything to try to like blow it. Venture Shaper Savant.
Yeah.
You can put that in play and bounce it back to hand. It was the one that's why you started playing Omniscience, right? People started playing these like goofy permanents. Caracas was common. That's probably the most common one. that would like blow you out for just putting a naked Emrakul in. So you started playing things like Omniscience to really guarantee it. Here, nope, we just got a naked Emrakul, and that's usually going to be good enough against Delver if we can't assemble a kill right now. We're going to try to do that with Lightning Bolt as the start.
Yeah, people are more playing lightning bolts in Legacy these days than their one-off Emrakul answers, So this Emrakul very well might go the distance. That said, this might be a whole bunch of burn here.
Yeah, we just bolted now. That's 12. We have an attack for 6. We have another bolt.
We block block 1, take 6.
Yeah, that puts us to 9.
How many permanents can Tim make this turn?
Right. That's the next question.
Yeah.
We have another bolt. We have 5 permanents. That's not great.
George is going to lose a life from the ring.
Yeah, but you can't take 2 hits from Emrakul. And like, obviously, George, very smart not tapping Ancient Tomb last turn.
Yes.
Makes you wonder, would the daze have been lethal? Because if we had dazed the show and tell last turn, George Jabor would have had to tap the Ancient Tomb, been 2 points lower. Is that going to matter? Maybe not.
Well, I think at that point, Tim may not. Well, maybe, yeah. As I say, may not have been able to deploy all the same threats. I have to back up too far to really remember it. But this is a situation here. George is at 6. Look, I've beaten Emrakuls in Legacy. It's possible if he can get up to 7 permanents here. You can take an Emrakul hit, go to 3, have a 3-power creature to swing back to put George down to 3, and then have a lightning bolt land drop to finish it off. That's kind of like the things that might happen. It obviously looks like that is not what's going to happen here, though.
So we have a Seek the Beast. And so, okay, we can lose all our permanents. We could Seek the Beast in response to the Annihilator. We can also Bolt in response to Annihilator. Just try to find a land.
Okay.
We're going to
daze our own bolt.
Okay.
Yeah. Daze your own bolt so that you can pick up a land to have a land drop. You get to bolt. You get a surveil trigger out of that to actually try to set up your next draw, which is, I assume, looking for another lightning bolt because now you have a red source in your hand. And it looks like we... That's the line. I mean, if you're Tim, this is the only possibility you have to try to beat this Emrakul. And it's there. Look, I've been in this situation. You stay down Emrakul, you have no permanence, but you can still win the game. It is not impossible. And he found the line that at least maximizes his opportunity to top deck into it.
Yeah, I mean, has the land, just needs to find the bolt, graveyard both cards, so it's a blind draw coming. And notably, casting this Brainstorm here, obviously you want counter magic, but Force was not good enough because you would die with one ring trigger.
That's right. Force of Will, paying a life would not get you there because you would then die in your upkeep. Absolutely right. And now we're just storming off over here, making a bunch.
Yeah, I don't know. We got land, Lotus Petal. Were you asking if we played a land? We definitely didn't play a land this turn. So we got City of Traders goes to the graveyard. That island was in play. Oh, it was untapped. I see the problem. Yeah, that should be tapped for the Brainstorm. And then we drew Brainstorm. We don't know Lotus Petals in the Delver deck, so that's it. Gonna concede to the Emrakul hit. And George Moore, I mean, Function wins that game at 1. Excellent life total management. Yeah.
Good try and honestly, well played by both ends, right? We watched Tim try to find the one line he could against George, but we also watched George very carefully manage his life total, both with that Ancient Tomb and with that one ring that did resolve, so that you end that game on exactly the life total you are allowed to end that game on. So very nicely done by him. Now we jump over into Standard, and we're deep into it over here. I see Merfolk in play, so that's a good start with the Floodplitch Drowner getting things going.
Yeah, this Beza card, I know this one's pretty powerful. I don't know that I'm as familiar with this mono-white kind of token control strategy that we have going on here. Very interesting.
Yeah, this is one of
the... Clean all this up quite nicely, assuming it does happen, and it is going to happen. There's a look at Beza. Wall attacks on this thing. Great for catching up. Part of the control strategy, of course. You saw it had multiple tokens, of course. Can catch you up on cards and life as well. Kind of a riff on timely reinforcements. One of the first to do it.
Right.
Big fan of that card am I. But Beza, a much more powerful variant in today's. It looks like we have an impending Overlord as well. Kind of off screen a little bit. That one is going to be a great way to follow up this Sunfall. And obviously you have the Incubator token as well. This might be really, really bad news here for Samuel Clayton.
Yeah, Clayton got a grip of cards as well. This mono white deck was pretty popular when Bloomborough came out, and then right after Standard Rotation. Like, this was one of the decks before the World Championship that people were really into. And then it seemed like everyone started testing for Worlds. The Standard format kind of moved past it. and it kind of fell out of favor now for the last several months. But I don't know, obviously, Phil's record on the day, but his team is 4-1-1, playing for the top 8 possibility, at least here at the 10K in Chicagoland, and mono white tokens is perhaps making a comeback. The standard metagame is all over the place. That might be a good way to go.
I'm into this though, and I'm long game one here. I mean, you see both other matches have already finished game number 1. We're deep in the trenches of this game, so obviously a control strategy. I mean, it says mono white token, but I think this deck is labeled as a control deck as well, and you certainly see that. I mean, you have your sweepers, you ever get lost, you have your removal, a lot of stuff to buy time, and of course, winning with just the inevitability of cards. Only 12 creatures, they're all 4 ofs. It's 4 Beza, Bounding Spring, 4 Enduring Innocence, and 4 Overlord of the Mistmoors. So these are cards that are, in their own ways, very sweeper resilient. So clearly, this is a deck looking to play a very long game and just kind of grind out the opponents. I'm sure mostly targeted at the Gruul aggro decks, but I think it's going to be well set up in these Dimir self-bounce decks as well.
Yeah, Caretaker's Talon is where this deck can go really hard because whenever 1 or more tokens you control enter, you draw. Then you can, of course, later on pump all of your tokens with it. Caretaker's Talon is what can really get to the end game and just turn Carrot Cake into something threatening. And you get to play all these fountain ports and all these just value lands along with sweepers. And sweepers are in a very good spot in standard when your opponents are playing Gruul and they're playing Esper self bounce value. You can just clear it all out with a Sunfall, and then any small token you make over the course of the game is going to get pumped up by your talents and just get there.
And that's, I mean, obviously what Phil here is playing towards, going to be able to create a blocker here. I mean, the Enduring Curiosity, a big pickup for Clayton. Unclear with the otter token if it'll be good enough to help catch back up. Going to make a fish as well with the fountain port. You called that out. When you're monocolored, it means you get to play a lot of utility lands. 4x fountain port in this deck to match with 3 sunken citadels to help pay for them. You see some of that action going on right now, and 2 demolition fields as well. So nice little sunken citadel deck, able to leverage that as a potential soul land,
and draws a card off of that. So fountain port makes a fish, draws a card. Right, this is just some incredible value on your opponent's attack step.
And then so we did animate the incubator, made it a 6/6, which then gets tapped by a flood pitcher. I really needed that. Otherwise, of course, you're just doing a chump attack. So you assume something was going to happen. So now that's cleared up. And we also
here we go. This is a big one.
Yep. Ain't big enough. I tell you what. This board seems pretty big. It ain't big enough for both.
We'll have to catch really the second talent. This is the card that is really, it's a runaway together with a kicker, if you want to look at it that way. And that was a card that did see some standard play. And this is definitely seeing standard play all over the place. This town ain't big enough. For 5 mana, you get to bounce 2 of your opponent's things when that's the point of the game I want to end it. But a lot of the times you bounce one of your own cards for value and you bounce your opponent's tempo play. Like, for instance, you can get rid of this 6/6 token at some point with this town ain't big enough while resetting one of your own ETB or flash creatures.
And here, obviously, we were looking to push damage, so we did actually bounce the fish token to push the damage thanks to the otter, which does have prowess tokens, prowess triggers. They're not tokens; they are triggers. And obviously, the Enduring Curiosity as well, as there seems to be a judge call. So we're going to cut back to our legacy match. That way we can keep the magic going despite the judge call. But it looks like we're kind of mounting a defense there. We'll get an update on what happens with that match later on. But here we are, deep into the trenches, what looks to be a very different script from the first game that we saw of Legacy. We did see, obviously, some turn 2, the One Ring, turn 3, the One Ring, and use that to kind of spring forward. Not a lot of threats early from Tim, but here, 3 threats early and a bolt follow-up means this game is going to get over with very, very quickly. Already a turn 2 clock.
So it looks like no Delirium quite yet, and doesn't actually make Delirium. Okay, so it's brutal, but it could be worse. Now, we did see, I don't know if George boards this in, but he does have access to sweepers in his sideboard.
Yeah, got a couple of Brotherhood's ends, it looks like, among other... Well, the Red Blast for sure. I mean, those hit everything you want. And obviously, here we go. Got the defense grid as well. So, yeah, it was just a question for the judge. So they're going to get
playing with Legacy. We'll get that standard match after this, I'm
sure. We'll get to the standard match quick enough. This looks like it's going to end quite quickly. Here's a Seek the Beast that's going to cost 2 Surveil triggers in response to defense grid. So, I mean, defense grid alarm bell should be going off. That's not a card that players pass the turn after casting all too often.
Yeah, defense grid makes things cast more on your opponent's turn, which is a pretty good way to slam it down and prevent counter magic, like, say, Force of Will from wrecking your day. So if George is able to survive a turn, which he looks like he's able to, even if we get Delirium made here, that would be 9-12 with the bolt. So very nearly lethal, I guess, but maybe George will get a window here. All right, but the Red Blast will definitely help.
Okay, yeah, that gives you some extra time. And the Ponders do help enable Delirium, but with the Delver down, that should be enough to stymie the clock, and then you get to untap, assuming nothing, your mana doesn't get messed with in any way. You'll be able to untap with all of your mana and then an active defense grid, and with not even 3 mana yet, and certainly not after casting Ponder, you have to imagine the shields are going to be down for Tim Hatch, and you'll be in the clear to cast whatever you want.
Yeah.
So a fine turn. Defense grid into kill a creature, a great way to do it. Not too scared about what's going to happen as a result. You don't really think they're going to be able to assemble. Tim is going to be able to assemble 13 points. You do know about a bolt.
Now, it does matter. So this is the thing, right? With sneak attack, you can theoretically end the game on the spot. With show and tell, just putting an Emrakul into play, for instance, and you're at 3, 4, 5, 6 life, you are not safe. You are not safe because you can get hit by a lightning bolt into creatures. So this game, even if George is able to put together Emrakul next turn, maybe in a different spot than we were in game 1 with that.
Yeah, in my experience, actually, a lot of times, in most decks, right, you want the Emrakul, right? That cleans up the board state, that makes it to where nothing can really happen. But most of my experience playing Sneak and Show against Delver,
Yeah.
honestly, on both sides, is you actually want the big lifelinker. Back when they played Grizzlebrand, you always just wanted Grizzlebrand. You didn't even activate it. They can't beat a 7/7 lifelinker most of the time. Just put it in play, don't activate it. Atrax is the new lifelinker, but that one does die to like Pyroblast and stuff like that. So easier for the Delver decks of today to kill, as there does go the City of Traders. That could be problematic.
Yeah, that's a lot of really interesting. Like you brought up the interplay of just how various sideboard cards even can change the way a matchup like this can play out is sort of the reason that Sneak and Show would fall out of favor in the first place, right? And obviously George is having a great run with it here, but yeah, very fascinating to watch it all play out in action and see the wide amount of interactions that Legacy has to offer from 32 years of Magic.
It's a lot of years. Here is, shields are down. You know that, Tim Hatch can't do anything. It's F6 territory. What are we going to put in? Murktide versus Atrax. Okay, that's the one you want.
It is. Attracts a trigger, new cards to refill as well. Mana open for a red elemental blast for the Murktide. Or to fight over, there's stuff that could happen here.
Check this card out. You read this one?
Yeah.
They introduced battles. They did the Tarmogoyf trick. Introduced battles before they were here. Here you go. You got a 7/7 flying Vigilance Death. That's a life link, the big keyword there. And as you can see, we're sorting things by type. That's because when Atrax enters, you reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each card tape, you can put a card from among those into your hand, but the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. So it looks like we're selecting from among creature, artifact, enchantment, and instant. No lands, interestingly. I think we already have those in the end anyway. As Brainstorm, Lotus Petal, Emrakul, and Sneak Attack appear to be the selections. No Force Will among the mix. A lot of times when you put Grizzlebrand into play, if you really needed to, you could start drawing 7 cards at a time. Try to find a Force of Will plus blue card to assemble some backup, a little bit of extra help. Here, not going to be able to do that. And when you see a Brotherhood's End in George Jabor's hand, but looks to be, even with the Lotus Petal, a mana short of casting it at the moment. So the game's not over. I didn't get a great look at George Jabor's hand, but theoretically, Tim Hatch could have whatever. The Petty Theft could have a Pyroblast effect. Any of the blasts, actually, right?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not red. Never mind. It's the one color Atrax is not, so your Hydroblast.
The point, the point being, whatever interaction Tim has here, it is live, right? He's got 4 creatures in play. His opponent's at 7. He's got a Lightning Bolt in hand. Now, we don't know if he has it, but if you're George, it really is just going to be a pass the turn and cross your fingers situation here, because Tim is going to have an opportunity to close it if he can find the right card.
Oh, we're also doing the bolt count. So you can do an attack and then bolt whichever one is blocked. And I believe that would also be a way to do it. So actually bolts are outs too. There's a lot of outs here for Tim Hatch.
I think there might be a Lightning Bolt in hand.
Is that the one from earlier? Oh yeah, we might just be dead. So we have Delirium. Everything has to attack.
Yeah, if the bolt is in hand, you come in for 6, 7, 8. You got the lethal here. Bolt our own creature. It looks, well,
Yeah, bolt our own creature. Yeah,
Yep,
that'll
there
do
we
it.
go.
Exactly. So bolt the Murktide, 3 Dragon Chain Channelers deal 9, and George is at 7. And of course, no lifelink thanks to bolting your own creature. And that's one of the tricks. Like I said, Delver can get through just putting a monster in play. And that's why you see cards like Omniscience in the deck, to be able to, obviously cast all the things that you can get, but also cast Emrakul will give you the extra turn. Oh, here we go. We're back to standard.
We never
the
left.
same game. Sick.
Look at these class cards, right? Caretaker's Talent versus, I believe, Storm Chaser's Talent. Just these cards have really done a number on standard over the past, couple months, I would say. It's not like they just broke out upon being printed.
Well, they're pretty
right.
strong, right? All the talents, I think, have seen some play across the board somewhere. The
Yeah.
black talent we saw in Sacrifice decks. We've seen Innkeeper's talent all over the place in Standard. These talent cards are pretty good as it happens. And Storm Chaser's talent, like you said, you nailed that one, among the mix as well. Big attack here. A lot of life.
Looks
like
a town. This town ain't big enough. I spot as along with that cut down, which will get rid of 1 creature here. So 20 life, if the life totals are to be believed here for Samuel Clayton. So you've got room to work with. But as we mentioned earlier, all the card draw from the mono white decks, why you call it a mono white control deck, at least there's full script over there for Phil. 7 cards in hand, I think. Like, what are you supposed to do in the long game here when you're using cut downs on tokens?
Yeah, using a cut down on a token is not where you want to be, but this is a good way to do it. This town ain't big enough to bounce both, and of course, wasted no time blowing that one up with a get lost.
That's right.
Because Phil says, no, thank you. That's a nice little, not like a loop, but it is a high synergy, right? Because you can just keep picking up your Storm Chaser's talent, use your Storm Chaser's talent to pick up these town ain't big enough, and you have established, a nice high synergy value engine, I'll call it. Able to just do that over and over again, but shut that down very quickly with Get Lost. Happy to give more map tokens, up to 4.
Big tap here.
Yeah, there's a lot of mana. 7 mana. Oh,
just kidding.
Giving it another look. As you mentioned, a pile of cards in hand. No shortage there. And Beza's among the mix. That's a big one for getting your life total a little more padded, which I think was starting to get a little bleak. And Enduring Innocence, the follow-up. A lifelinker in its own right as well. Yeah, okay. I was saying, I don't know what draw steps get out from here. I don't think there's any necessarily, and that's going to finally end game number 1 of the standard match, as our legacy match, of course, is awaiting beginning game 3. Not sure how deep in the trenches we are there, but
no, that was a great demonstration of the inevitability of the mono white token deck and why you can call it a mono white control deck, because all Phil did basically that entire game was play tokens and get them removed. Play creatures, get them removed. Sometimes my opponent plays creatures and I'll remove them with my sweeper. And in the end, just doing that, just playing that natural gameplay in which his opponent still had plenty of life, he still ended up in an inevitable dominating position. That's if the standard metagame fits for that deck, that's the power of it right there.
Indeed. And a tough start here for Flex Slot First String is the name of their team. George Jabor, of course, one of the big progenitors there of Team Flex Slots, but alongside Garrick Alford, our MVP, piloting Teamer Breach and a Breach Mirror, which I think we're going to avoid showing for rather obvious reasons as much as possible. But you know what? Mac Andrews versus Garrick Alford, that is some interesting magic going on. This is some very high-powered teams against each other. I have Team 1364. I don't know if they named their team or if that's just a pre-generated. I imagine it's just a pre-generated. So no team name for Tim Hatch, Mackenzie Endress, and Phil Severman, who are up a game across the board here. Of course, George Jabor in game 3.
Yeah, we're not showing much of the modern Breach Mirror for good reason, because no one really wants to watch Breach play.
A lot of game actions. Come on, come on.
That's true. There are certainly a lot of button clicks on Magic Online if you were doing that. But this is a little more interesting to us. The turn 1 DRC facing down the Sneak and Show.
Ooh, good start. The Bobble DRC little opener, great way, especially with the fetch land. I mean, you're really setting yourself up to set up Delirium on turn 2.
Yeah, this is big. It looks like he's thinking about thinking about what we're looking at there.
I think he kept.
Yeah.
Likes it.
Yeah, why not? Let's look at the top of both cards, both decks.
Yeah, we both. I know what's going on both. Looks like Consigned to Memory.
That's
actually, the card that was on top. We chose to keep that one. Makes a lot of sense. The triggered ability can come up. You can actually use that against the triggered ability from Atraxa, which can matter.
True.
Obviously, it can't counter show and tell, but it can work on the back half if that's something you're worried about. But most importantly, it beats the defense grids and the one rings. That's really what it's primarily there for. But has some cute little stifle interactions going on there too. A lot of applications in this consigned to memory card. Basic mountain, respecting some wastelands here, I imagine. Otherwise, it's pretty free to grab Volcanic Island if you're not thinking about wasteland very intentionally. Got an island too. Yeah, so we get to play around wasteland very nicely here.
Yeah, and when there's a DRC out, that makes a big difference. Not so much, and they don't need the wasteland. Tim doesn't at this point for Delirium, but just the turn it would cost you to lose your land to wasteland, even if you have additional mana, it means additional damage you're taking. So just playing around it in these first few turns allows George to be extremely mana efficient here. He's able to sculpt what he's hoping will be a big combo turn. You can see him deep in the tank here on this ponder, trying to figure out if these are the three that'll work with my hand and set up in the next turn or two, a sneak attack, a show and tell. There's a City of Traders in his hand to get a couple more mana, and decides, nope, these three aren't going to do it. Shuffle, take a new draw.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. You can't really see the cards too well because in a deck like Sneak and Show, like ponder decisions like that can actually just decide the difference in games on the spot, right?
Yeah.
These are some of the most critical decisions you make, and you can't really see it that well, but there's a lot of other stuff going on as well. Like I said, the basics I think is very indicative of kind of how the Sneak and Show deck's built. They have 4 Mega Slid in the sideboard. They're a Blood Moon deck, right? They try to Blood Moon other decks some number of the time, so they have to be able to fetch and play with basics. And then, of course, you have all these soul lands that we talked about, the City of Traders, the Ancient Tombs. You can just play those last on the turn where you're going to be using it right away. And then, you've really played around Wasteland for your entire game plan and still kept all of your mana available to you.
A lot of cards over there for Tim. Some counter magic, some brainstorms. I think we decided those cards might be Delvers. So a lot of options about how he wants to approach the next few turns here.
And if we just attack here, it's a lot of patience. You could cast the Brainstorm and just try to force damage right now, but that makes your Brainstorm weaker. So what you're doing by attacking and not setting up Delirium right now, even though you have the ability to, by putting an instant in the yard, obviously you get to hold up Consign, which is nice. That's part of the equation. But also part of the equation is saying, I think I'm going to play a long game. And that's not what George wants to do. Is here comes Show and Tell right now.
So, George, in addition to, obviously, you don't want to play City of Traders and have to lose it, etc. This all makes basic sense. But at the same time, it allows you to kind of go from, I'm at 2 mana. So the difference between going from 2 to 3 is casting my spell. The difference between going from 2 to 4 is casting my spell with days backup, right? So that is just an incredible difference that saving your City of Traders can make in this situation. Of course, that's the power of an Ancient Tomb City of Traders deck, as we see throughout Legacy. This demands an answer from Tim, who is going to brainstorm looking for something.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything, right? The consigned to memory that we left on top does not work against this. Yeah. So we have to go looking for Force of Will or 2 Dazes. Blast would have worked if we had it right away. It's not going to work off this Brainstorm.
So we're resolving the Surveil trigger off the DRC now, and deep into the tank is Tim on this one. So obviously, if it's a Force of Will, you just slam it, which means it's probably not. So then you start thinking, okay, well, what could we be thinking about here? And something like Daze could be the answer. We'll find out.
It has to be some counter magic. Otherwise,
it was a Daze.
Nothing to think about. So it is a Daze, which we can pair with another Daze and counter this. We do have a mountain up. Need 2.
Yeah, I think that might have been what he was thinking about there, is whether or not you want Daze to try to find a second Daze, or whether you want to put it in the graveyard just to find Force of Will. Now, obviously, he may just have something else in hand, but he's spending a lot of time thinking about this, realizes how big of a moment this is. This is game 3, the last round of Swiss, possible top 8 berth here in Chicagoland on the line for the 10K Team Trio NRG Trials. So, decision made by Tim. Here we go.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I mean, that's the Brainstorm. That's your spell. We have a Daze. Do we have another Daze? I think it's a Delver, Consigned to Memory. I can't see that middle card. It's a Murktide Regent. Okay. Interesting. Well, here's Atraxa. Now with the Consigned to Memory no longer up, we cannot consign the trigger. So that trigger is going to happen. That seems pretty good for George Jabor. is we're going to start sorting the permanents to see what we can see. No Force of Wills yet again in the top 10 for George Jabor, which, I mean, you already have an Atraxa, so you can't be too mad. But a lot of times that's what you want to see. You want to see a Force of Will and then like a sorcery blue card or like Omniscience. That's another value thing going on here with Omniscience is just having an enchantment that you can get that's a blue card off of your Atraxa. That probably comes up.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thinking about it here. So now that this is resolved, of course, it's going to flip back. If you're George, cool, I did my thing. Great. Now I'm trying to figure out how I can lose in this spot. And that's why he's spending time thinking what he wants to take here. If you're Tim, all of a sudden your answers to the resolved Atraxa become much, much less, if not zero. So we'll shift the turn back over to him here. And very quickly, I think we're going to head towards a resolution here because either he's going to be able to answer Atraxa, the game will continue at least such that, you know, those other cards that came off Atraxa will come into play. Otherwise, though, it might just be back up against the wall for Tim, and a win on the line here for George. Is not a lot of clean looking answers over there for Tim.
Yeah, and we know that there's two dead cards coming, right? We don't have any fetches in play. We didn't cast anything yet to get rid of those cards through the Surveils and the Dragon's Rage Channeler. And with George at a very high 18, the trick that we did in game 2 is not going to work, as here's a Seek the Beast on upkeep that finds the critical Force of Will 2 cards down. If Brainstorm only drew 4, then
gosh,
poor Tim would have had and another one.
Or if he had been to the days off the Surveil.
Sure, yeah,
but I do think the odds are correct. If assuming Days was the card on top, your outs then and the next two cards become more Dazes or Forces of Will as opposed to just Force of Will. So I think he made the right choice there, but having that Force of Will come just a little late is absolutely brutal. Now, Seek the Beast and Upkeep was a nice trick because you do get that Surveil before your draw step to pitch a different card, another one of those dead cards into the graveyard to maximize your draws. It just is going to be a question as to whether or not there actually are any draws here that work.
Well, we know Pyroblast gets rid of it. And we know that there's no Force of Wills that were revealed to Atraxa. So if you just say, all right, the rest of George's hand at the time of show and tell is all blank. If that is true, then I can find a Pyroblast, and I can Pyroblast the Atraxa, I can attack, and then things aren't horrific for me. I'm not just dead to this thing beating me down and all the things that it does. If we don't find it, I mean, you get at least like a turn. Like you can maybe do a turn and you're okay. Once you've gained like 14 life, I mean, things start to get really hard.
Yeah, I was gonna say one problem there is the fetch was a tropical island, not a volcanic island, which means we're probably not looking at a blast on this one. So.
And you have to make this attack because the DRC has to attack anyway, so you might as well send the Murktide too. But now we can put the Atraxa in front of the Murktide, and then the DRC still has to attack next turn. It's tough.
Yeah. Well, looking up, in the other matches, Mackenzie Andress did take down Garrick Alford on the Breach Mirror, Grinding Breach, taking down Teamer Breach. So Tim's team does pick up a victory, and that mono white tokens deck in the hands of Phil Silberman is up a game. But Atraxa for Sneak and Show for George looking like we might throw a win back towards the other squad here in Legacy.
Yeah, which would bring the standard match, which just finished game 1 not too long ago, would be the decider for game 3. And I have to imagine if you're Samuel Clayton, you're going to have to figure out a strategy to kill Phil Silberman much quicker, as that long game did not seem to favor Samuel Clayton based on what we saw from game number 1. As George tapping mana, casting something, it's Sneak Attack.
Yeah, and at 29 life here, like this was the big turn late here for the Force of Will for Tim. You keep the game going. You keep the Sneak Attack off the battlefield. Still not sure how you're going to deal with the Atraxa. Now, that said, if you do find an answer to Atraxa, you've got a shot.
Pyroblast. Not Pyroblast. Uh-oh. Yeah. And not a Brainstorm or something else. It was a DRC. So things start to get hard.
Yeah, that was really the turn, I think, where he had a chance to find it and get back in the game. As it stands now, probably not. I mean, I guess technically you will get a few more turns. You can do some blocking. You know, you're not. It's not just over, but every turn this goes on, you feel like you're falling further and further behind.
That's because you are. I mean, even if you're chub blocking, I mean that's a card you lose, and 7 life, more importantly, coming for George Jabor. And now the Sneak and Show deck is kind of known for having some really dead draws after doing
True.
its thing, right? You can
True.
just draw big monsters, you draw all these things, and even after an Atraxa, I mean that Atraxa trigger was not that impressive. Having Force of Will the sneak attack, that could matter a lot if we do finally find an answer and have to work through like 40 life or whatever.
Well,
But
look at the Surveil lands doing work here, right? You talk
right.
about the dead draws from the Sneak and Show deck, which is absolutely a problem for it historically. It's exactly that situation where the Surveil lands come up. You're able to surveil a Lotus Petal, one of those dead draws, into your graveyard and take a live draw just off of an upgrade to your mana base. Just something small like that that can ease the percentages of your Sneak and Show matchups is big for a combo deck like this.
Yeah, a huge deal here. Being able to, I mean, literally almost like a time walk, right? Just gets rid of a dead draw and potentially gives you something. And it's at least, even if it's another dead draw, I mean, that's not 2 dead draws in a row.
You're one deeper, right? Yeah, got to get through it at some point.
Here we go. Another DRC to chump block. And the tough part here, too, Emrakul, when you attack with it, has to be tapped. The Atraxa having Vigilance, huge deal here. Brainstorm, a great draw. All the keywords mattering. Looks like a ton of spells in hand for George Jabor, which does not spell good news for Tim. Really needs a lot of blanks. And I said, the Sneak Show deck has them, but does not look like George has them.
Well, it is interesting, right? Atraxa, of all the words on the card, the one that might be the most relevant is lifelink in practice.
Definitely.
You know, like,
yeah.
Everyone plays it, of course, for the busted ability, etc. But once it's in play, all that really matters is the lifelink. It's devastating.
My play group used to joke back when we played Siege Rhino was in standard.
Yeah.
We used to joke that Delver couldn't beat a standard deck because they can't beat any life game. They just can't beat a Siege Rhino. That was their entire joke. It's like, what do you do? Nibble Mongoose? Come on, get out of here. Siege Rhino. It was the whole joke is they can't beat a Siege Rhino. And that really, I think, encapsulates that exact principle where it's just big life linkers are really, really hard for Delver to beat in history. And of course, Grizzlebrand used to fill that role. Now we get something with Vigilance. Doesn't have to tap to even attack.
Yeah, certainly an upgrade on Grizzlebrand, I think. I mean, I guess Grizzlebrand was more combo-y and that the decks could be built around just drawing your whole deck with it, a la the old reanimation style decks. But in practice, man, Atraxa is just so good at playing every kind of game you need.
Well, here's Sneak Attack. And looks like we have monsters to put into play after a Ponder and a Brainstorm. That's an Emrakul. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22 coming across the red zone.
Oh, I haven't felt 22 in a very long time, but I very much appreciated that. That was great.
And here comes the big attack. Annihilator going to consign to memory the Annihilator trigger. Okay. I mean,
legal play.
Sure. That keeps us in this. It got harder. Sneak Attack makes things way harder to try to grind through. And you have to do blocking on both.
Match. We see the legacy game in all likelihood wrapping up here. I think if we were to see the full table, we would see Mackenzie leaning over to Phil instead of Tim's board right now. Maybe I'll help in with the standard game.
And then, of course, the Emrakul will be sacrificed to the Sneak Attack. Up to 41 goes George Jabor. And, there's a Ponder. Okay. That's a live draw. All right. I mean, Tim's at 2.
I think Tim might have another monster in hand.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's no good. Come on. I want to see Tim find a blast here. All right, Ponder. Those are bad.
Those are not it.
There's like a Seek the Beast, but the other 2 draws are bad. Yeah, we got to get rid of that.
All right. Well, we got a live draw, I suppose. I might have caught a glimpse of another creature in George's hand, which would, of course, remove any doubt. But hey, we got a live draw here for Tim to try to get rid of Atraxa and leave your opponent on 1 land.
Yeah, I mean,
or I'm sorry,
if
1
we
card.
Draw, like Seek the Beast, we could go like Blast plus. I know we don't have the mana.
What do we get? What is it?
Oh, he didn't show us. That's no fun. Well, I mean, theoretically, you get another chump block with Delver. Okay, back over to George we go and taps very quickly, which leads me to believe, and he has a Brainstorm, still has all these. And joking a little bit about the dead draws. I mean, the one ring fixes that problem too, right? It's just a redraw in the middle game. And here it is. It's exactly a redraw. Oh.
There we go. The protection, I think, wraps it up. Tim's seen enough. Or It looks like actually, though, I think George might have taken that one, but it looks like Phil might have come from the top rope and won on the back table.
Didn't even let George win it. He was looking like he was going to win with an Intrax in play, but no, the clean sweep 3-0'd that team. And so congratulations. I mean, you know, I obviously we're gonna get to talk to these teams here in just a moment, but Phil Silverman able to somehow finish the match before George Jabor has me tickled. And
That was great. We were watching that legacy game just grind on, trying to live. The life total comes closer and closer. And imagine you feel so good. Your teammate just leans over and goes, "Hey man, don't worry, we got it.
yeah, we're done. Yeah, we're done.
We're good here."
It's and so yeah, Phil Silverman, Tim Hatch, and Mackenzie Endress we're gonna get to talk to them a little bit about their deck choices. And especially I'm very interested to hear about this mono white control deck that was able to get things done. And Tim Hatch bailed out. Didn't have to have it, didn't have to find it. Got bailed out. So of course, Team Flex Slot first string taking the L there. And of course, our MVP from the 2024 season, Garrett Alford, falling among the mix as well. And that's got to bite it for George Jabor, being like, I was going to win this one. Nope.
Yeah, well, that leads us into the end of the Swiss, which means we're headed to the top 8. After this, of course, we're getting an interview with that winning team, but it means on the other side, we'll be looking at the top 8, including some of the decks we've been watching over the last few rounds. So it's going to be very exciting. We're going to try to bring you all, same thing we've been doing here, stick with some legacy, check in on standard. Hey, maybe we'll get some modern decks that aren't breached. That format's got a lot going on in it right now. So if we get a chance to showcase some cool stuff from it, we certainly will. But it's been fun watching Legacy, seeing some throwback decks. Cephalid Breakfast this afternoon, Sneak and Show.
Very fun. Huge throwback there. And you know, like I said, I think there's a lot of innovation going on across the board. You know, we had that really big ban list update that impacted. Obviously, Modern was the focus there. You know, you talk about 3 bans, 4 unbans. That's a big shift. But there were bans and unbans across other formats too. And I think that being able to do a team event here on our series very like shortly after those kinds of changes across the board. And of course, standard is constantly changing and, you know, obviously being really revitalized across the board. We have a lot of standard events coming up on our schedule as well. We're going to talk about all throughout the rest of the day, but you know, this is a moment where there was a lot of focus on modern, especially yesterday with the showdown. You know, is Mox Opal too good? I don't know. We're going to find out, but certainly the breach decks look to be very dominant. Didn't even win an event though. Grayson Nemitz able to beat it in the finals with Eldrazi ramp. So there's still some question marks. There's still brewing going on happening in Legacy too. There's brewing going on around, you know, the breakfast decks with Nadu, now the Sneak decks with the One Ring. There's some of that stuff going on. In standard, the big question was the Gruul aggro deck. You know, is this the strongest deck in the format? Well, I don't know. Now here come these self-bounce decks. A lot of innovation going on, and being able to showcase all of that in small doses across the board in this team event is what it's about. And like I said, I'm interested to hear the process, what I like talking to these players about. It's really one of the questions I always ask is, hey, what's your process? What did you go through? Because that gives a lot of insight, not just to what's going on in the formats, but how these teams approach the formats. And speaking of, congratulations on your victory.
Thank you.
Tim Hatch, we were watching a lot of your Legacy game, got bailed out a little bit there. Talk to me a little bit about your process against Sneak and Show, and of course selecting Delver for the event.
It was still anyone's game, all right. No, I mean I've played Delver for years. It's a deck I'm comfortable with. It's a deck I think is still good in Legacy, so I'm gonna keep playing it. Obviously against Sneak and Show, ran onto a little slow start game 1 and kind of got run over in game 3. Couldn't find Force of Will, but yeah, it was got bailed out. That's what you bring the teammates for.
Right. So speaking of, let's go on just down the line. So back end, we didn't really get to watch your breach mirror, but paired up against or paired against Garrett Alford. I mean, that's a very competent pilot. How do you feel about your mirror? How do you feel about selecting breach for the event? Talk to me about your deck choice and the match you played.
Yeah, I lost the die roll and I was kind of worried, and then I mulliganed, but my 6 was like kind of obscene in that I just put 5 permanents in play on turn 1.
Jeez.
And then. I don't know. I found the breach pretty quickly, and the game ended, and I basically bought back the play by having a pretty good hand. And I'm pretty happy where breach is at this point. I think it's the deck to beat next weekend, and I played a lot of breach in the the pre-MH3 days or so, pre-LTR, and I feel pretty competent. And the deck's better than ever, and I'm pretty happy with my spot.
I really like you highlighting that you steal the play back by putting more permanents in play. That's a really good way to frame it, and like another, feather in the hat of the extremely powerful playing with 7 to 8 mocks and breach deck. Extremely powerful. And of course, we'll go all the way down. And probably the most interesting deck choice of the mix, not a deck I have personally seen as much, the white token control. Talk to me about this. This is a long game one that we got to see multiple instances of as we were bouncing back and forth the legacy match. Talk to me about playing the token control style deck in this event.
Interesting is code, right?
It can be.
Oh, yeah.
It opens the floor here.
So before the tournament, at Mac's behest, I tried every other deck. I just played like at least a league with everything. I only really liked the Pixie deck, which I haven't even played against today, but which I think it's excellent. But most of the other decks I tried felt like they were missing one thing or another. I played this deck. I don't get a ton of time to play, but the last time I played this deck, I just barely lost an RCQ, and it felt still pretty strong, if undeniably quite clunky. It's not a
fair.
It's not a tier 1 deck. I don't think so. I think it's a solid tier 1.75 strategy. But
it's a lot of granularity there.
Yeah. I have a very rigid tier system. But I don't know. I value experience a lot when it comes to these sort of formats where the edges are pretty small. And I felt like I was going to know what to do pretty much all the time. I think that the Pixie matchup is pretty good. I think the Gruul matchup is slightly favorable. You'd kind of think it was really favorable. It's not. The Gruul deck's it's just way more powerful. But
have we mentioned tier 1.75?
1.75, baby.
Yeah, that's a thing now. Obviously, your teammates were very supportive of you playing a tier 1.75
well,
deck.
Mac made the mistake. He's just I trust you to choose the deck that you're comfortable with. And I'm like, that's so much. That's maybe the worst thing you could say to me.
Phil's been playing Soul Sisters for 20 years. He posted a deck with a bunch of white cards in it. I was like, yeah, you probably will win with that. I don't know.
Easy. So easy. I only lost to one horrible matchup today. That was fine.
That's what I was going to ask, right? You said you've dropped one standard match all day?
No, I dropped two. Yeah, I lost actually the same matchup I played earlier. I lost, and I think I played pretty poorly in general, and their draw was quite good. And then I lost to Doomsday Excruciator Jace combo, which is, I don't know, maybe the worst possible matchup in the room for me.
I didn't know that was a thing, and I've played a fair amount of standard. So that sounds awesome.
I mean, it's
not
very cool.
Especially since you're on the other side of it now.
Yeah, if I was playing a different deck, I'd be okay with it. But yeah, he's smashed me.
Tier 1.5, maybe you can battle it, not 1.75. Okay, yeah, well, that's interesting. Well, congratulations. Obviously, your team's record better than X and 2, so getting a little upgrade thanks to the teammates. And of course, Tim, you got to leverage the teammate broken. So once again, congratulations. I think you guys are basically a lock for the top 8. So we'll be seeing more of you guys. The floor is yours. Anything final you want to say before you go and prepare for the top 8?
Shout out to Harrison Fang for not being able to be here, so that meant I could play. That's it. That's it.
Incredible. Perfect. A perfect send-off. Congratulations. We'll see you guys in the top 8. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck, you guys.
Well, there you have it. That is the 7th and final round of Swiss of our team trial here in Chicagoland. Again, it's a $10,000 event, a lot of money on the line. And of course, for players like Mac Indris, and we saw Garrick Alford and all those players that they just beat, a lot of leaderboard considerations going on. Being able to make the end of the year championship on those points-based slots starts now. And so, for these players, it's a lot. There's a lot riding on this in the points. Obviously, a lot of cash at risk as well here as we do prepare for the top 8. But that will do it for a final round of Swiss. So we're going to come back. We're going to come back with a formed top 8. And of course, we're going to come back with some more standard, modern, and legacy, especially, action for you. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back here in just a little bit.
Yeah.